I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics. MessianicApologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for August the 8th, 2025. Today is a very important day for me. I've been spending a lot of it in prayer and contemplation. It was 30 years ago today that I gave myself to the Lord and was radically born again and transformed. And it was just as I was getting ready to enter into high school as a freshman. It was also on the heels of our family getting ready to enter into the Messianic community during the fall high holidays, 1995. And along with that, one of the first major changes we made was transitioning from a pre-tribulation rapture belief to post-tribulationism. So today's a very important day for me, and later, I did not know this until a few weeks ago, I'm going to be going to Whataburger, right? Which we have all over the state of Texas. Those expanded out by now because today is Whataburger's 75th anniversary, and they've got 75-cent Whataburger. So, of course, I got to get in on this deal. But before then, we do have an important episode of Messianic Insider. All right, starting out with our theology roundup, we've been going through this week a number of the reasons provided in support of the pre-trib rapture by Alan Didio. Why the post-tribulation rapture view doesn't hold up. And we have been politely responding to, yes, there are legitimate reasons which are available from a post-tribulational perspective to these apparent claims. All right, so today we're going to be closing up at least this part with his fifth reason. Post-trib ignores the imminent return of Christ, Titus 2:13. We're told to watch for Jesus, not the Antichrist. So how do we approach the issue of what Paul communicates in Titus chapter 2? And more importantly, is the apparent blessed hope, because that's what this is tied into, is the blessed hope actually the pre-tribulation rapture, as many people conclude? So we're going to go to our ministry publication, the combination, When Will the Messiah Return? Dangers of Pre-Tribulationism. There we go. And in this is actually from When Will the Messiah Return, the chapter, The Second Coming. There's a discussion. Is the blessed hope the pre-tribulation rapture? And indeed, I would politely stress that while I do not believe that what one believes or does not believe about the second coming is a salvation issue per se, we should be willing to have some of these discussions, because right now we are approaching, of course, the fall high holidays. They're going to be right on our tail in about 6 weeks. Every year when Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur roll around, there is an anticipation which builds regarding end-time events. Of course, we see a lot taking place right now in Israel, Gaza, the Middle East, Russia, Ukraine, some things here at home. And there are going to be people who visit your Messianic congregation or synagogue expecting the pre-trib rapture to take place. So we've been going through a number of these things to hopefully help you know how to handle the common claims in favor of pre-trib, among other things. All right, so is the blessed hope the pre-tribulation rapture? What is the blessed hope? The term, the blessed hope, or tain makarion elpida, only appears once in Holy Scripture. It was used by the Apostle Paul in his letter to Titus. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to all men, instructing us to deny ungodliness and worldly desires, and to live sensibly, righteously, and godly in the present age, looking for the blessed hope and the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Messiah Yeshua. And there's a lot in there which can be unpacked, but right now we're looking at the blessed hope. With this as support, many conclude that the pre-tribulation rapture is the blessed hope which believers are to all eagerly anticipate. However, this is not what Paul said. Rather, what believers are to wait for is the glorious appearing of our great God and Savior. Titus 2:13, New International Version. What this appearing encompasses is of importance. Is it the secret rapture we are told so much about by pre-tribulationists? Or is it when the Messiah will arrive to judge the world at the Battle of Armageddon? His appearing, whatever it is actually our blessed hope. The specific Greek term, which is often translated appearing in these verses, is epiphaneia, meaning active appearing, appearance, from the BDAG lexicon. Paul spoke of this epiphany in 1 Timothy 6:14, instructing his friend to keep this command without spot or blame until the appearing of our Lord Jesus Christ. New International Version. George Eldon Ladd comments in his book, interestingly enough, entitled The Blessed Hope. Quote, at the end of his life, Paul expresses confidence that he has fought a good fight and looking forward to the day of rewards at the judgment seat of Christ, unquote. Paul specifically wrote, in the future there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. 2 Timothy 4:8, New American Standard. The epiphany of the Messiah will occur when he physically descends toward earth, and the holy ones or saints are brought up to meet him. Titus 2:13 and 14 admonishes believers that in the meantime, they are to live in obedience to the Lord. They are specifically to be the people whom the Messiah will purify for himself, a people for his own possession who are zealous for good works. English Standard Version. We should have no doubt in our minds that those being spoken of here are intended members of the Commonwealth of Israel, Ephesians 2:11 through 13, composed of many Messianic Jewish believers and the righteous from the nations, as Paul appropriated concepts spoken of in the Torah. We actually discussed this last week regarding Titus chapter 2 and descriptions regarding ancient Israel applied to mainly non-Jewish believers. For you are a holy people to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be for him a treasured people above all the peoples that are on the face of the earth. Deuteronomy 7:6, New American Standard, also 14:2, and 1 Peter 2:9. Our blessed hope is the Messiah's appearing, when the redeemed will meet him in the clouds, and he then will defeat his enemies and come to rule and reign as king over the earth. This is when he will reward all of the righteous for their service to him, and they will be given responsibilities in this future kingdom. The Apostle John aptly recorded this. Then the seventh angel sounded, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, the kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Messiah, and he will reign forever and ever. Revelation 11:15, New American Standard. The restoration of God's kingdom, the restoration of Israel, will not be complete until the Messiah appears in the clouds and makes his way toward the earth. So, is the blessed hope the pre-tribulation rapture. The blessed hope, as stated by the text of Titus 2, is his appearing. That's what the blessed hope is. And of course, that is something which me and many others would conclude occurs in a post-tribulational context. All right, so that concludes our theology roundup for today. Next week, we are going to be continuing with some pre-tribulation rapture claims, but we're also going to be going into some other issues which are doubtlessly important for us as Messianic people, especially as we contemplate the future. All right, so let's go through some news. And of course, we do the news roundup after the theology roundup because all of the news is time sensitive. Excuse me. And along with that, just looking at some of the statements coming out of Israel regarding the situation in Gaza. You hear this one day, you hear that another day. Likewise, what's happening Russia-Ukraine? Is President Trump going to be meeting next week with President Putin? You hear one thing one day, you hear another thing another day. But the whole point of us going through news is so we can stay as grounded as possible, and we do not need to wait for some dramatic point event to, hey, I need to find out about this. One of the reasons why we hit with Messianic Insider 5 times a week now is so we can have an ongoing conversation and we can calmly and rationally, as best as we can, address the issues of importance. And we don't need to be just caught unaware when something dramatic occurs. All right, so all of these news stories I'm about to go through, you'll be able to look through these later today when this episode is archived at messianicapologetics.net. All right, our first story from Visegrad 24. This is yesterday, August the 7th. ISIS has been ramping up its attacks against Christians in Mozambique and the Congo in recent months. Villages are set ablaze, churches destroyed, and Christians beheaded. No protest marches in London, no student encampments in the USA. Indeed, why is that the case? This is a terrible slaughter. The people who think that there is some kind of a gross genocide going on in Gaza, and they're welcome to their opinion. Well, what about something like this? Shouldn't you be marching against this as well and demanding that the global community take action? By the way, regardless of what position you take or not take regarding how Gaza's been handled, it is a disaster, okay? But can't you be, if Israel is doing terrible things, can't you be more even-handed and recognize that there are other things, there are other places out there in the world which are a problem? Oh, it's because there are no Jews involved. That's why there's just utter silence about something like this. Yeah, we know how this all works by now. We really do. Okay, our next story from Visegrad 24, and this shows you, because there's going to be some more on the what the Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet has decided. It just shows you how things can change from day to day. So this is one story from yesterday afternoon. Israel won't annex or occupy Gaza. It will launch a time-bound, limited military operation once cabinet approves it tonight, and will then hand Gaza over to an international body, which will have neither Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority. Okay, so that's one report from yesterday. And then another one from the New York Post yesterday. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Thursday said his country will forge ahead on its plan to take over all of Gaza, despite widespread opposition, but added that he doesn't want to keep it and pledged to hand it over to Arab forces. So But what does it mean here? It's planned to take over all of Gaza. How long is that going to be? So, look, we follow these things so you can be aware of how the situation, Israel, Gaza, other situations, they do change from day to day. And you need to be able to sometimes trace a narrative of events. We've done that when Israel started attacking Iran. We did that when the U.S. joined in the attack on Iran, the 12-day war, as they're calling it now. Now, with this Gaza situation, we similarly need to be aware of how statements from different governments, whether it's the Prime Minister of Israel, other parties, they change from day to day. And so how do we adapt to that? And when you get acclimated to this way of looking at current events, you can hopefully be very tempered as a believer who examines prophecy, examines the end times, to be able to spot people who speak presumptuously. Look, we're paying attention to these things. We're monitoring situations, but we know they can change. And how many people speak presumptuously because they jump off and run off to conclusions because they want to be somebody. And then they bring discredit to the prophetic message of Scripture. That's probably one of the most difficult lessons people have to learn. And I don't think enough people probably learned it from the turn of the last millennium. But hopefully, with God's help, we will learn some of this. All right, this was important to pass along. From Breitbart yesterday, August the 7th. President Donald Trump told Breitbart News exclusively last week here that when he finishes the objective of making America great again, he will leave behind a much more peaceful nation and a much more peaceful world. Okay, now I know, like with some of you, I'm looking at some of President Trump's remodeling of the White House. I think he's made, I mean, this is just my opinion. You can disagree. I do think he's made the Oval Office very tacky with all of that gold filigree. What he recently did with the Rose Garden, paving it. I know the reason for it is that the Rose Garden gets muddy and seats sink into the mud, and so it's just better to have a paved area. I understand that, but it is looking too much like his Mar-a-Lago resort. I understand a White House ballroom. Why does the United States not have one in its, chief executive's house when other places, Buckingham Palace, the Kremlin, they've got ballrooms? I understand that. I'm inclined right now to believe that his golden age has to do more with reducing the national debt, bringing manufacturing and industry back to America, and making us more financially prosperous, viable, and stable. I'm inclined to believe that for right now. But when you see this, there are people, a much more peaceful nation, a much more peaceful world. They see echoes of what Paul said in his writing to the Thessalonians. While they're saying peace and safety or peace and security, then sudden destruction will come upon them. There's some people who think that what Donald Trump is doing is going to pave the way for the arrival of the beast. Maybe even he is the beast. I'm not so inclined to think that, but I do believe that what he is doing is probably, although events change, so I've got to be careful with how I say this, is leading to that period of where they say peace and safety, peace or security, and then boom, sudden destruction will come. Now, how long is that period of time going to be? Is it going to be something relatively short, or is it going to be elongated? That is where there are a lot of things I pray about, think about. I know from the time I spent in the early 2000s, or actually going back to the late 1990s, early 2000s, there are people who thought, well, they're saying peace and safety, and then boom. So they thought it was a much shorter period of time. Right now, people are not saying peace and safety. And really, what that whole period of peace and safety is to do is to facilitate the apostasy, people abandoning the Lord, people saying, ever since the promise of his coming, right? That's what Peter communicates. Things have been the way they always have been. How long or how short is that going to be? I think we've got a lot of people think it's a very short period of time. It could be a much longer period of time. We don't know, and we've got to be willing to at least put the possibility out there, because people can be lulled into a false sense of security, thinking that nothing's ever going to happen, and then boom, something does happen. So we wait, we'll see, but we do need to be aware of the statements coming from the chief executive of the United States. All right, from the New York Post yesterday, President Trump will only meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin if the dictator also meets with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Moscow on Thursday claimed that Moscow and Washington agreed in principle to hold a one-on-one meeting, supposed to be one-on-one meeting, of Putin and Trump hours after the latter said he still wasn't sure whether the Kremlin was tapping him along. Okay, so are we going to see some kind of a high-level meeting, Trump, Putin, and or Zelensky next week? We know that the talk is there. We know that statements have been made. Hopefully, this Russia-Ukraine situation can be brought to some kind of an honorable conclusion where we all can take a break and realize that maybe World War III is not at the brink as much as a lot of people think it is, but we don't know. So this is a situation which continues to develop. All right, I thought I should pass this along. This is from the X channel Trumpet Voice, reposting something from President Trump. Now that the nuclear arsenal being created by Iran has been totally obliterated, it is very important to me that all Middle Eastern countries join the Abraham Accords. This will ensure peace in the Middle East. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Okay, and Trumpet Voice responds to this. The only peace coming to the Mideast is the false one as the third temple in Jerusalem arises. Only the Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ, will bring lasting harmony. We all agree with that. We must first go through the worst time in human history to get there, the Great Tribulation. Okay, so at least on this post, he doesn't sound like a pre-tribulationist. Now, the real question is, and I think it's a legitimate one, the only peace coming to the Mideast is the false one as the third temple in Jerusalem arises. So let's just posit a scenario based on some of these statements. Trump wants all these countries to join the Abraham Accords. We know from what is seen in a place like the UAE, you've got synagogue, church, mosque standing side by side. The three Abrahamic religions, as they're commonly labeled. As a result of all these countries joining into the Abraham Accords, would you possibly see a third temple, the process toward it, in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount? Back to what I just talked about regarding Trump wanting to leave the U.S. and the world in a much safer and more prosperous condition. How long would such a quote-unquote peace last? Is it going to be short? Is it going to be long? A few years ago, when I attended the Messiah 2023 conference, somebody gave us a book, and I only looked through it, but the premise was rather interesting. And when I hear things like this, I just put it off to the side. Okay, I'm not sure how he came to this position, but the proposal was if the temple was in operation for approximately 40 years before its destruction, right, in the first century, following the arrival of the Messiah, his ascension into heaven. So the temple was operating for around 40 years following Yeshua, his departure to heaven. What would it be like if the temple were operating for 40 years prior to his arrival? That is not, I mean, I thought it was an intriguing possibility. And I also thought to myself, wow, Anti-Semitism would go through the roof, not to mention different PETA memberships, right? Because you see animal sacrifices, every day at such a rebuilt temple. And animal sacrifice is something we as a modern society, as modern people, are completely unfamiliar with. As I've said many times, the ancient Greeks and Romans had a better handle on animal sacrifice than evangelical Christians do, because it was part of their religion. We don't, to us, that's something primitive. It's something disgusting, like blood and fat and burning and all this. Yeah, that's a possibility. Just put it away. I mean, we need to consider these kinds of things, whether they happen or not. The ball is rolling toward a lot of these matters. We don't want to be presumptuous on timelines, but we all know that there's talk. And where there's talk, there is a will to see some of these matters come to fruition in some way. Okay, our next story. This is from Open Source Intel yesterday afternoon, reporting the Times. I'm sure that's the London Times. Israel could cut UK security ties if it recognizes a Palestinian state. The paper warns this move could have serious consequences, noting Israel shares critical intelligence on terror threats in Britain. So we know that different Western European countries, the United Kingdom, France, also Canada, have announced intentions to recognize a Palestinian state, perhaps in September. But that doesn't mean that everyone in those countries is necessarily in favor of it. And there will be possible security consequences. Also from Open Source Intel, this is more from home here locally in the United States. Attorney General Pam Bondi. Today, DOJ and state are announcing a historic $50 million reward for information leading to the arrest of Nicolas Maduro, the world's biggest narco trafficker. Now, who's Nicolas Maduro? He's not just some, drug warlord in South America. He's the president of Venezuela. He's the successor to Hugo Chavez. Okay, and the U.S. government has just placed a $50 million bond on him. Wow. And, before getting started today, I saw some reports that Trump is probably going to order the U.S. military to start taking action against drug cartels in Central and South America. So we're going to just see what happens. I'm not saying that using the U.S. military against drug warlords, etc., is a bad thing. I think it's probably a long time coming. I think some of you all may remember the 1994 film with Harrison Ford, Clear and Present Danger, when Ford, in his capacity as part of the CIA, is involved with fighting drug cartels in Colombia and what have you, and the military gets involved a little bit in that. So this is an unfolding situation, but to place a $50 million bond on the president of Venezuela, I'm lost for words with that. Okay, I thought this was useful to pass along from Eyal Yacobi. He has a lot of good information on the situation in the Middle East, Israel. A Saudi analyst from Riyadh. Saudi Arabia has no problem with establishing relations with the state of Israel. Israel is a neighboring state, and no one can erase it. Hamas is a terrorist organization that has occupied the Gaza Strip. So we know that in spite of the Israel-Hamas situation, Israel moving toward having diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia is something which President Trump wants to see. Those on the Saudi Arabian side want to see. Saudi Arabia, is, I think, rightfully recognized as kind of the crown jewel of the Arab Muslim world. And if they can have relations with the state of Israel, then what is that going to do to the Middle East? We're likely to see a new Middle East come forth, resultant of the 12-day war. Of course, there's a lot of dust continuing to settle. There's the situation in Gaza. International pressure is building upon Israel. Some kind of point event, prophetic or otherwise, is building. Okay, back on the American home front. Some of you all know who Doug Wilson is. Doug Wilson is a well-known Reformed Calvinist pastor. He strongly identifies as a Christian nationalist. He has perspectives which have influenced a lot of younger people, particularly those in Christian nationalism who have really spoken out against the state of Israel and Zionism in recent days. Doug Wilson, fortunately, has recognized that anti-Semitism is a bad thing, and he's done his best to curtail some of that. But he was recently interviewed on CNN. This is passed on from our good buddy, I'm saying that in tongue-in-cheek, Smash Baals. This is what Christian nationalism looks like. And here, this is reposting something from Pete Hegseth, who is the Secretary of Defense. Doug Wilson has a group in Moscow, Idaho, Christchurch. It's Reformed, it's Calvinist. They've recently opened up a church in the Washington, D.C. area where Pete Hegseth recently visited. And a lot of the things which Doug Wilson advocates as a part of Christian nationalism include women should not have the right to vote. Women should not be in positions of political power. Homosexuality should be punishable by death. And he does advocate kind of a post-millennial kingdom now eschatology. Definitely supports replacement theology. But some of his ideas, I know, have influenced, at least in passing, a number of people within the Torah movement, one law, pronomianism. And I said in passing, I wouldn't say that Doug Wilson and I agree on very much, but this is Christian nationalism. This is what a lot of it advocates. And we'll just wait and see what occurs. Of course, Doug Wilson and I agree homosexuality is sin, abortion is murder, but some of the things he advocates, in particular with, rigid Christian patriarchy, we would not agree on. And no, I am not happy to see the Secretary of Defense attend his church. And while I do believe in a strong national defense, Pete Hegseth is not the person I would necessarily have chosen to be SecDef. Okay, from Newsmax today, again, the ongoing developments in the Israel-Gaza situation. The Israeli Security Cabinet decided by a decisive majority to approve Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to defeat Hamas, including controlling Gaza City, the premier's office said shortly before 5 a.m. on Friday. Now, what is controlling Gaza City supposed to mean? Does it just mean we're going to go in there, we're going to take out Hamas, we're going to establish a hold over Gaza City, and then later turn it over to somebody else to maintain? Or does it mean we're going to permanently take over Gaza City? Going all the way back to 2005, when the Sharon government pulled out of Gaza, and then, of course, Hamas came in and took over, but all the Israeli settlers were pulled out unilaterally. One of the things which did not get enough attention, especially on those who connected, whether you agree with them or not, Israel pulling out of Gaza, and then Hurricane Katrina taking place and devastating New Orleans. There are a lot of people who made that conclusion. But one of the things which never got discussed that much, and this is where biblical studies comes into play, when did Israel ever in history, especially in biblical times, ever have control over Gaza. Ever. He's never had control over Gaza, never been able to control it. That's where the Philistines were. They were a continual thorn in the side to Israel. That never got enough attention. And to this day, this is a continual place of problems for Israel. And I think the roots of it go back all the way to the biblical period. Okay, two more stories. Some of you remember the other day I used some adult terminology to describe why various people support Hamas. They support Islamic fundamentalism and extremism, especially if they are people who are discovered to be on the political left. Why do they do this? Is it because they, will be polite here, they don't have adequate reasoning skills? Well, watch this clip reposted by Eyal Yacobi. It's 48 seconds. A Palestinian activist tells her viewers, listen to this, burning the American flag. It's a beautiful sight, but it's not enough. We need to burn the U.S. government down to the effing ground. Thank you, and free Palestine. Yeah, these are the types of very, very stupid people who, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, but they don't think of the long-term consequences of what they are saying. Okay, if you want to support a resolution to the Palestinian situation, okay, but you think that all Western governments need to be taken out, taken down? Yeah, this is how dumb and ignorant some of these people actually are. Okay, and one more story, and this is from My Charisma, and I thought this was absolutely fascinating. It's from today, August the 8th, L.A. Marzulli, what J.D. Vance's UFO interest means for the coming Great Deception. Now, J.D. Vance is, of course, the Vice President of the United States, and apparently he is interested in this whole alien UFO phenomenon. In recent months, the topic of UFOs, or unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAPs, has surged into mainstream political and cultural conversations. Among the voices taking a serious look at these mysteries is Vice President J.D. Vance, who has openly expressed his fascination and concern over the growing evidence of unexplained objects in our skies. Now, L.A. Marzulli shared, Vance discussed UFOs candidly on the Ruthless podcast, acknowledging the many puzzling videos and reports that have emerged in recent years. I haven't gotten to the bottom of it yet, Vance admitted, but we're only 6 months into the administration. His comments reflect a growing political interest in uncovering the truth behind these phenomena, especially as they continue to appear in military and civilian airspace. Okay, so this does need to be noted. There are a lot of people, we've discussed the whole topic of the Nephilim, who believe that in Genesis 6, fallen angels, human females, cohabitated. They produced a race of giants known as the Nephilim. Fast forwarding to today, Yeshua the Messiah said the days before his return will be like the days of Noah. Many conclude that will involve some kind of a reappearance of the Nephilim, manifest specifically as UFO, UAP, extraterrestrials, all of that. And it's part of some end-time deception. Okay, so that's basically the way a lot of people in prophecy approach this. A lot of people in the Messianic community approach it this way as well. I am inclined as my default to approach it this way. But when you get a high-profile person like the vice president say, hey, I'm interested in aliens, I'm interested in UFOs, we're only 6 months into our administration. What has he truly been briefed on? What has he seen? Who has he met? I mean, these are the kinds of questions people ask. And even for my own family, I have people who are related immediately to me who, without question, they will say, look, universe is too old, it's too vast, God has got other stories playing out parallel to the human story, to which I have politely responded, look, I will meet you here on this subject. When Yeshua returns, there will be mysteries of the universe revealed to God's people. Everyone agrees on that. But how specific are some of these going to be before his return? I don't know. But this is something which, if a Charisma magazine picks it up, and whether you like Charisma or not is not the point. Charisma is probably the #1 resource read by all people in the Messianic community. Of course, Charisma's #1 person who they promote is Jonathan Cahn. He's the world's most well-known Messianic Jew. So when something like this ends up in Charisma, it's important for us to at least mention it and monitor it. I consider, this is my personal opinion, I consider the Nephilim issue to be a wild card in the end time scenario. But at the same time, because of what it represents the greater universe. How do we deal with this issue or that issue regarding the cosmos? More realistically, if the Lord tarries, we're going to see a lunar base, a Martian base with permanent human inhabitants in the next 20 years. That's going to happen. And yes, at first it'll just be scientists in the military, and they'll be digging up rocks, they'll be digging up soil, they'll be looking for different minerals, possibly adding new minerals to the periodic table. But they're going to be, just from that, a lot of questions about human life, our place in the universe. And so that's why it's important to monitor. And even though a lot of people in the Messianic community and their different Torah studies or what have you may not see these questions asked, they are live wire questions in a great deal of contemporary evangelicalism and even parts of Judaism. So it's important that we know about it. Okay, so that concludes our Theology News Roundup for today, August the 8th. Next week, of course, Mondays are usually our days where we've got to catch up with all the news from the weekend, and we only tend to have a shorter theology analysis. But of course, we'll see, as I'll see first as we get closer to Monday. Once again, we're reminded how the God of Israel is in complete control of everything happening. As his people, as his sons and daughters, we have access to the infinite power of heaven. We just have to cry out to him, whether that is him intervening in our own lives. God, how are we going to pay that bill? How are we going to fix this problem? I may have a new health issue. Or whether it's, Lord, is society, flying apart at the seams? Is this train going off track? Are we on the verge of World War III? Can disaster be averted? What about the national debt? Whatever it is, we have access to the power of the Lord for him to hear our cries and for him to dramatically intervene. And so one of the things which I think is so important about our ongoing conversation is we get to talk about this. We get to acknowledge what the issues are. We also get to monitor them over an elongated period. So it doesn't take some dramatic point event where it's like, oh, they've started attacking, or, oh, we've joined in, for us to recognize that, yeah, this thing was going to happen. We already saw the early stages of this. Stay grounded, stay calm, but also recognize we're taking some giant leaps forward to the return of Yeshua. So we'll see, of course, what this weekend brings and what new developments there are. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and donations toward all of our ministry efforts. You can give online at outreachisrael.net/support. We'll see you again on Monday with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you. Shabbat Shalom, and take care.